A lot of contemporary practices involving liberty and security goes to the way in which we understand boundaries, or as I prefer to put it, boundaries, borders, and limits. You know, the ideal we all work with is that the boundaries of all our social systems, our society, our community, our nation, and the spatial borders, the territorial borders within which we frame ourselves physically, I suppose, and the limits of our most basic principles of law and jurisdiction, all those converge at the same place at the same time. It's as if all boundaries and all borders and all limits are stacked one upon the other, and we can therefore make a simple distinction between a here and a there, an us and a them. And that's the basic motif that runs through almost all debates about what we mean by both liberty and security. But it is a far cry from the empirical realities in which we live, in which I would say we are seeing increasing distinctions and differentiations and disaggregations between different kinds of borders, different boundaries and limits. And one of the most disconcerting ways of thinking about those boundaries these days is to think about the relationship between the police and the military. You know, we assume that the police work indoors and the military work outdoors. The military deal with our external security and the police with our domestic security. But if you look at the way police are deployed, the way they are trained, you look at the way the military are deployed and trained, that distinction becomes decreasingly plausible. Police are deployed externally for peacekeeping and have been for quite a long time. And if we look at the precise details of what's going on in the patrolling of the relationship between liberty and security in particular sites, in immigration centers, for example, or through the surveillance technologies, for example, the distinction between a zone of policing and a zone of militarization that simply doesn't work very well. There are many, many reasons for this, and the pattern varies dramatically from place to place. But it seems to me if one wants to look for an example of how the boundary patterns of contemporary politics are changing, I think one might want to look very carefully at the way in which the distinction between the internal and external as a police zone and a military zone is being transformed out of all recognition.